just came back on.
When you go to another planet, there's just so much potential for making brand new discoveries.
I'm actually putting something together that's flying to Mars.
One way or another, you're going to be on the ground in 7 minutes. We want it to be there safely.
My name is Heather Bonham, and I'm helping prepare the spacecraft that will fly our next Mars rover to the Martian surface.
My name is Diana Trujillo, and I work with robotic arms to collect samples on Mars.
I'm Al Chen, and I lead the landing team for Mars 2020.
My name is Michelle Tommy Polizzi.
My name is Mujige Stricker.
My name is Jared Tagadan.
My name is Katie Stack Morgan,
And I'm helping to protect the next Mars rover.
Mars 2020 will be seeking signs of ancient life in the rock record of Mars.
What we're trying to do is to rove around the surface of this unknown planet,
Collect samples
Process the tubes as they come back.
To look for things that we call biosignatures.
so that eventually we can bring those samples back to Earth and determine for the very first time, did life exist on Mars?
But also, where could it be preserved for 4 more billion years for us to find it?
Before the rover actually flies, you have to make sure that everything works properly with the flight software and the hardware.
We hit the atmosphere going, 12, 13,000 miles per hour.
After the journey through space, through the vacuum.
We try to test all of our hardware to the environments that we would see.
So that's where a lot of the testing happens behind me.
we spend lots and lots of hours here testing everything.
It gets put in an oven, it gets put in various chambers and clean rooms.
So what we can see over here is the stacked spacecraft.
The robotic arm is actually right behind me.
This is the place where the magic happens.
This is the Mars Yard, and this is where our rovers practice driving over rocky terrain.
There are hundreds of people that have to come together and build a spacecraft.
You kind of have to put those different pieces together and make sure that those pieces all are going to work.
And I feel like such a lucky person to be working on this.
Everything that you're touching and all this hard work that you're putting in the long hours.
20 years, your children will be reading this in their science book.
It feels great.
Or they're looking it up online.
I used to clean houses, and today I'm trying to find out if there's life in another planet. My name is Diana Trujillo, and I work with robotic arms to collect samples on Mars.
Love it.
What we're trying to do is to rove around the surface of this unknown planet to try to find out if at some point there was life on the surface of Mars. On the robotic arm, we have 2 very interesting instruments. The robotic arm is actually right behind me. We will use the arm to place those instruments or the drill that will collect the sample, which are the ones that will be analyzing the terrain and helping us understand what is it composed of and understanding if there was some traceability of life. And I feel like such a lucky person to be working on this. We're standing on the Mars Yard. The intent here is to demonstrate that we have enough grip to continue to move the rover up and down in any hill on the surface of Mars. I was born and raised in Colombia. There was a lot of violence going on in my country. So for me, looking up at the sky and looking at the stars was my safe place. I came to the US when I was 17. I learned English, paid myself through college, and eventually applied to be working here. We spend lots and lots of hours here testing everything from how it should be moved, from how we're going to configure it. This is us trying to understand how we will use the hardware and the software to get it to do what we want to do on the surface of Mars. It is more about what your enthusiasm, your passion, and if you're determined to do what you want to do in your life, you will find a way.
It's beautiful.
One way or another, you're going to be on the ground in 7 minutes. We want it to be there safely. I'm Al Chen, and I lead the landing team for Mars 2020. Entry, descent, landing is all about getting the vehicle from the top of the atmosphere down to the bottom safely. We hit the atmosphere going, 12, 13,000 miles per hour. We have to deploy a supersonic parachute. And that's all before we get down into powered flight. So we have a new system that'll take over at this point. It'll start taking images of the ground. That'll let us figure out where we are in latitude and longitude. Jezero Crater, the site we're going to with Mars 2020, was actually rejected for curiosity because the site was considered too unsafe. And really, the terrain was way too rough. But now we have the ability to land at these places that we never really could go to before. The Jezero Crater site, if you look at it from space, is pretty obviously a delta. We think that Mars was habitable about 4 billion years ago. So the question is not just where was that life, but also where could it be preserved for 4 more billion years for us to find it later. I worked on Curiosity for 10 years, so this is a very familiar feeling. I think I was too young the first time to really realize what was at stake. Big G's on the order of 11, 12 Gs. We are in powered flight. I've been on the other side of this too. My wife was front and center on Insight. This is actually the same seat that my wife was sitting in for the Insight landing. The same seat that I was in actually back in 2012 for the Curiosity landing as well. Coming up on entry. A lot of history for us in this room. Touchdown confirmed. Proceed. We might be uniquely positioned as 2 folks who are married to each other to know what it's like to land things on Mars.
Wow, so cool.
When you go to another planet, there's just so much potential for making brand new discoveries. My name is Katie Stack Morgan, and I study rocks on other planets. So Mars 2020 will be seeking signs of ancient life in the rock record of Mars. The instruments are really well suited to look for things that we call biosignatures, which are signs that ancient life might have been there in the past. To really confirm that life had a hand in creating those signatures or textures, we really do need to bring those samples back. We have capabilities in laboratories here on Earth that we can't fit in a compact instrument on a rover. This is the Mars Yard, and this is where our rovers practice driving over rocky terrain. We work together with the engineers to understand what type of terrain the rover can handle so we can get to the most exciting places, which are often the most challenging. Our landing site for Mars 2020 is Jezero Crater. What's really exciting about Jezero is that it has a beautifully preserved delta. They tend to be a really good place to preserve evidence of past life. And we look for things like organic matter that get concentrated in the rocks of a delta. So this rock is a sandstone, not unlike a rock that we might actually find in Jezero Crater. We would be interested in sampling a rock like this to understand what each individual sand grain has to tell us about Mars and its evolution. Growing up as a kid, we used to go on lots of hikes and would visit national parks for summer vacations. So when I found out that I had the opportunity to combine geology and love of the outdoors with exploring rocks on another planet, I thought, this is really the perfect type of thing for me to do. Not only could I work on an interesting science project, but I could do it with a big team of people all working together with a focused goal. And I thought that's what I want to do.
So awesome.
It's really important that we send a rover that's clean and we make sure that it doesn't contaminate Mars. My name is Mujige Stricker and I protect Mars from Earth bacteria. The next Mars rover is slated to go to Mars, collect samples so that eventually we can bring those samples back to Earth and determine for the very first time, did life exist on Mars? There's nothing that we can build that's sterile. So we take swabs and wipes of the spacecraft as it's being built. It gets put in an oven, it gets put in various chambers and clean rooms so that we can maintain that level of cleanliness. If we do find something on Mars, we have to make sure it's something that actually came from Mars and not something that hitched a ride. This is the place where the magic happens. Oh, it's definitely cool. In this lab, we look specifically at spores. So spores are those hardy microorganisms that can actually survive if it made it on the spacecraft in the journey through space, through the vacuum. It's very humbling to be a part of this big project because there are hundreds of people that have to come together and build a spacecraft. There's no one person that can say, I did this, I made this happen. It's always a we. I owe it all to Carl Sagan and watching the cosmos. I remember being a little kid, going to the public library and renting that VHS. And from that moment, the light bulb turned on. It actually was the start of my passion of science communication. We are citizens of our universe. We have to be good ambassadors when we are exploring other planets, other moons. So it's the right thing to do.
Go girls' education. Who is confused about whether girls need scholarships?
How does it
Girls
feel?
are changing
It
the
feels
world.
great. Hi, my name is Heather Bonham, and I'm helping prepare the spacecraft that will fly our next Mars rover to the Martian surface.
Scholarships.
So here we have the rover test facility for the Mars 2020 project. So the goal of Mars 2020 is to collect samples of the surface of Mars and perform lots of other exciting experiments. There's 7 different instruments on the rover. Some of the work that's being done here right now is integrating the arm and the mast. My role is mostly on the systems engineering of the launch and cruise phases of the mission. It's essentially getting it to Mars. As a systems engineer, you kind of have to put those different pieces together and make sure that those pieces all are going to work. You get to kind of see the bigger picture. Before the rover actually flies, you have to make sure that everything works properly with the flight software and the hardware. So I have a really unique story. I actually ended up becoming a professional dancer in New York, and I really lived that out to its fullest and wear all the makeup and rhinestones and things. But for some reason, I always knew I was going to come back to this kind of curiosity that I've always had with space. There's some of that creativity here too. Sometimes I feel like we're kind of like the stagehands in this big production for the rover. It's bringing together a bunch of people, it's making sure that the hardware works, and it's kind of similar to a performance where, on launch day, it'll be the opening night, which is what we're all here for.
Yes. Congratulations. So cool.